So for all the people who think, oh, I need to sell, and maybe they feel a little bit icky about that because they think they make people buy something that they don't need or don't want or whatever. The good news is, if the first two parts, picking the right market and having a great offer, the last thing is, I wouldn't say it's automatic, but it's not really as hard as people think. He has this saying, the riches are in the niches. He gives a very easy example about a time management course. And so he says, well, like a basic time management book, for example, it's like $19. And then you make a time management course for salespeople. And so the salesperson already thinks, oh, he really means me.
Why does it matter so much to have an appealing offer?
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.
How do I find paying clients? This question is what I often hear when I ask coaches about their biggest challenge. And the answer of my guest today, Julika Franke, is create a compelling offer. And creating a compelling offer is not only about marketing. It's in fact not at all about deceiving your client or your customer into anything. Instead, it's about understanding their world. It's about understanding what is valuable for them. And it's about communicating that value in their language. And this is exactly what today's episode is all about. Becoming crystal clear about how you as a coach create value. Julika has adapted the value equation, a concept of acquisition guru Alex Hormozi, for coaches and consultants. And today we unpack every element of this equation in detail. How do you communicate a dream outcome? To what extent can or even should you make promises? And how can you put actual monetary value, so a price tag, on your offer? All of this with Julika. Let's get started by hearing who she actually is.
My name is Julika Franke. I'm 38 years old. I'm in the field of communications and marketing since, I think, more than 15 plus years. And now I specialize on helping coaches and consultants in building their business without freaking out, let's say. So I try to give them some structure. We are doing something that is called business blueprint. And at the end, they know who they are and what they are offering and why people should buy from them.
Awesome. Who is that typical client of yours and what do you usually help them with?
So I'd say that I have three different target groups, audiences. So one part is people who are directly coming from coaching institutes. So they just got their certificate and they now want to become self-employed as a coach. And I try to help them with that. That is one group. The other group is somebody who is maybe 2 or 3 years in their self-employment, and they see that it is maybe a little bit more messy than what they expected. They are maybe not really, moving forward at the pace that they want. And then we are working together. And then there is a third group. These people are maybe 20, sometimes even more years into their business. They wrote a book maybe, so they really added some conceptual value to their field. And now they want to, bring their business to the next level. And that is what I'm helping them with.
Mm-hmm. So kind of the 0 to 1 and then the 1 to 10 buckets.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And how does your story of arriving at this kind of mission of being a coach, helping people with their positioning, with client acquisition, with getting focus on their business, how did you arrive at this point?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that before coming to that podcast. And I thought, wow, basically I'm in the field of personal development since a child because my mom is a psychotherapist. And so really I experienced all this stuff from childhood on. So that was my first touch point with, let's say, coaching and personal development in general. Then later on, I studied at the University of Wittenherdecke, which is, I think I can say, a hub for systemic thinking. So the ones who are in this field of systemic coaching, they probably know names like Aris von Schlippe, Rudi Wimmer, Fritz B. Simon, and these were my professors. And that was really, a very cool experience to learn from them directly. And that had a major influence on me for sure. And then I really got a lot of coaching myself. So I was a coachee When I was a manager in my leadership position, I was a coachee for health, for relationship. Like really, I love being a coachee. And so that brings me now into the position where I basically can understand every client's clients because I was one of them at one point.
Yeah, it makes sense to me that you became a coach, but you could have also become a systemic coach and be great at exactly that service that you received and enjoyed as a client. How come you decided to focus on helping others with their business setup?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, after my studies, I started as an assistant at this very university. And as always with assistants, you get many projects and some of these projects stick. And one of my first projects was creating a new website for the university. And there it immediately clicked. So I really saw, wow, this communications and marketing thing, that is really something for me. And this is how I became also head of marketing. And then I got another department. So it was communications and marketing. And that was basically my first little organizational development process because I merged these two departments while I was there. And so, yeah, I don't know, it just pulled me in and I loved it. And I really love the resonance that I get from people when I telling them back what I see in them. So, yeah, and I think I have now this interesting combination of one coming out of this business world and being somewhat straightforward in a sense, but then also being very familiar with the coaching world. And so I think I can offer people a much more sensitive or differentiated approach to marketing and not this chaka, yeah, we're doing this, I get you 10K, la, la, la. And people like it. And I like that people like it.
Yeah. So firstly, simply combining your expertises, on the one hand, having lots of exposure to the coaching development world, and then on the other, your actual marketing expertise and basically putting those two puzzle pieces together. And then I can also see that lots of marketing content and the sort of get rich quick gurus doesn't resonate with the kind of coaches who are listening to that podcast, the kind of coaches who purchase products at MetaFox and who have a systemic worldview, etc. I guess it makes sense to come with a more empathic marketing consultancy offer there.
Yeah, I think empathic is one thing, and then really trying to understand what they are offering. I think for most systemic coaches, the normal marketing world is too flat. There is not enough depth in it, I would say. And so they do not feel seen and they do not feel heard. And they are afraid that they are pushed into some marketing concepts where they need to be salesy in a way they don't want to be. And so I think it's a lot about alignment, about authenticity. And yeah, I try to offer them exactly that.
Yeah, I can 100% relate even for myself. Like, I would also consider myself a child of different schools in a way, but I definitely lack this authenticity bit when it comes to this fear of being seen as someone who I am not, kind of. And that needs, I think, lots of nuance.
Yeah, I think that especially the sales part is a very delicate one. So when it comes to being visible and this idea of I am selling my offer, that is something that many coaches struggle with and have very mixed feelings about that.
Cool. And you put lots of focus on this question of how does my offer as a coach actually look like? Why does it matter so much to have an appealing offer?
Yeah, so I'm working a lot with the frameworks of Alex Hormozi. And basically, he says being successful has three main components. And so first is you need to pick the right market. So for all the people who think, oh, I need to sell, and maybe they feel a little bit icky about that because they think they make people buy something that they don't need or don't want or whatever. So there is this whole emotional mixed feeling bubble around this persuasion part. And the good news is if the first two parts, picking the right market and having a great offer, the last thing is, I wouldn't say it's automatic, but it's not really as hard as people think.
Okay. Really cool. I actually, while you were speaking now, I already took some notes, and because I really like this, how you frame this as the foundation. So picking the right market, have an appealing offer, and then getting to this persuasion aspect. And down here, I have something that you've provided me beforehand, which I think you call the value equation. Can you introduce that to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the equation that we are seeing here is basically the detailed version or the explanation how we create an appealing offer. And as we see here, it's really an equation. If the numerator goes up, the whole value increases. If the denominator goes up, the whole value decreases. So that's the whole idea of this value equation. And it's just a way of trying to understand what do our clients actually really value, and how can we look at creating an offer so in a structured way so we don't get too confused. And because Alex Hormozi says, and I think that that is very universally true, people buy from us if we are solving a problem. So what we're seeing here is that he puts two things in the numerator, which is dream outcome and perceived likelihood of achievement. So the perceived value of our service or product increases if we have a big dream outcome. I think the dream outcome really is the cornerstone of this whole equation, because we have many more things that influence this dream outcome, which is the market, which is the target group, which is the problem that we are solving, which is the result that we are promising, etc. So there are really many things that, like a little mind map, be still around the dream outcome. It's the market, it's the problem that we are solving, it's the target group, and it is the result that we are, in the end, quote unquote, promise. I know that this is a very tricky word for coaches because they always say, I cannot promise anything. It's in the process. I don't know. Then the perceived likelihood of achievement, that is as it says, the perceived likelihood that the client will achieve the dream outcome that he or she is expecting from working with us. And so it's really the likelihood, again, influenced by three factors, which is that, are we appealing to them? Is it the right chemistry? Do they just feel that we are a good person? And then do they trust our method? That with the approach that we are offering, the probable outcome will be an outcome that they highly value. And the third thing is, and that's maybe the most tricky thing, is do they trust themselves achieving that outcome? All three factors can be influenced by how we craft our offer. And that goes for all the four parts of this equation. So basically, we look at each part of the equation and then try to make a list and see, okay, where could he or she struggle? And then we try to give answers to that, not in the sense of persuasion, but really in the sense of offer. So is it a checklist? Is it a once per day call? Is it, like we can create these little things that really add to our offer in reality, not communication and marketing, but really in reality, what makes the offer more valuable for them.
Okay, really cool. Let's try to make this a bit more tangible. Imagining an example coach. Let's say we are a career coach. How could that dream outcome look like? What is it that I'm promising in your experience?
Well, first of all, it's important to understand what the dream outcome really is for your client. So it's not something that we are drawing on a white piece of paper. The best way to find clients is to speak their language. And how we can get there, we can discuss that. Also, there is something that I apply oftentimes with my clients, which is a test client strategy. We understand much more our target audience. But then, okay, let's say we are a career coach and we understood that the dream outcome for our target audience is to have a fulfilling job, for example. And one thing that we always do before really crafting the offer is something that I call the transformational journey. So there is always a point A, which is where the client is today. And there is always a point B, which is the dream outcome, where we want our client to bring. The point A in this example that you just mentioned, where I should start with a job research, not sure about my own skills. I lack confidence. I am afraid that I will never get a good job. I'm frustrated with the last job that I had, stuff like that. And that is really important to really put it in the language of your client so that they read these points and they think, and we try to aim for 5 to 7 points here. They read the items and the first one and they go, oh yeah, that is something I can relate to. The second, oh yes. And then the third, that okay. And then at the end of the fifth item, they should have the impression that you have been in their head. And then that's the hook, basically. And there is nothing wrong about it. It's just you understood who you are helping.
These different aspects, they also contribute to each other, add up to each other, in the sense that if I have a really clear target audience, which is the first thing you mentioned, maybe then I'm not just a career coach, but I'm a career coach helping women displaced by AI, let's say. So being a bit specific, and that also enables you then to be really specific in your language, where people say, wow, this is really my experience that she's talking about. I can really resonate with that, I guess.
Absolutely. And maybe here I'm jumping, or I bring something in from Alex Hormozi. he has this saying, the riches are in the niches. He gives a very easy example about a time management course. And so he says, well, like a basic time management book, for example, it's like $19. And then you make a time management course for salespeople. And so the salesperson already thinks, oh, he really means me, and then you make a time management course for salespeople who care for outbound sales. And at the end, you think, like, this group is really not very big. And this is always where coaches are afraid, because they think, oh no, I want to be broad. I don't want to be too narrow. I'm afraid. But actually, a certain narrowness really helps with finding clients.
Yeah, and I would say that also goes beyond coaching. It's just also an entrepreneurship. Like, before you can serve everyone, you need to start really serving someone.
Yeah.
So how could the dream outcome in our example actually sound?
Yeah. So for example, right now I'm working with a leadership coach in the leadership field. People are overwhelmed. The leaders started really very mission driven some years ago, but now it wore off and they are really frustrated with their impact. They do not feel recognized in their team, etc. So that's the problem. And then the dream outcome could look like, okay, I am more like centered. I feel grounded. I'm sure of my ability as a manager. The meetings that I'm leading are more effective, stuff like that.
I'm wondering, how specific do you get? Do you remain rather vague and brief, or do you give very concrete examples there? Like, what would be your advice?
If it's possible to be very specific, then that's okay. But already the examples that I gave for many coaches are frightening. So many coaches think, oh no, the best thing is just, you get sessions with me. And there is some sort of transformational thing going on, and somehow you will feel better in the end. So already saying, okay, you will have a job, or you will have more energy in your leadership position, and your meetings will be more effective by 20%. That's woo. Okay, really, we will write that on my website. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a certain carefulness when it comes to promising anything or even guaranteeing a certain outcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of puts us to the right side of the equation, right? This perceived likelihood of achievement, which is on the one hand the likelihood that the client perceives, but also what does the coach, what do I as a coach trust myself to promise? What do you see happening when you tackle this part of the equation?
Yeah. So especially in the German market, we do not promise a lot. We are more on the perceived likelihood of achievement part. So do they trust us? There is a lot of personal chemistry going on here, which is not something that we can 100% influence, but there are some things that we can influence. For example, the perceived authority. So for example, I got the feedback some years ago that I was too nice. Somebody declined my offer, and then I asked them why that is, and they told me, well, I think we could be friends. And then she decided for somebody 20 years older than me. And she conceptualized it in like, she thought that it's the age, but I don't think it was the age. I think it was how I came across, and that I wanted at all costs to have that eye level and to be, just connecting. And that may be something that is a problem for coaches. And in this thing, maybe I was too much of a coach, because we always want to have that rapport, right? That we know works very well when we are actually coaching. But here it's important to understand that until they signed the contract, we are not their coach. We are somebody who offers a service. So that's important, I think.
Yeah. So you're referring to this kind of, does my client trust me? And that also comes, or you can like dial up that lever if you come across with a little bit of seniority and expertise, not being exactly in their shoes, but communicate in some way that you have been in their shoes, you understand them, but you are also further now.
Exactly. You need to make them understand that you are further along the way. And there are little things that help with that. So especially for women, do not smile all the time. So we tend to smile all the time and try to make the other person like us. And that is not helpful. And we can be friendly for sure, but it's not. So we can reflect on that. How much do I actually want to be liked? And how much do I want to lead this process? That is one thing. Or the other thing is, how do I dress? So that was also a value of mine that I thought, oh, they should like me anyways if I'm sitting here in a sweater or if I'm sitting here in a blazer. No, it does make a difference. Yeah. Do I wear earrings or not? What kind of earrings? What is, and that is maybe another thing that we can think about and that I would highly encourage people to do is, once we know who is our client avatar, turning or flipping the whole thing and asking yourself, what is the service provider avatar of our client? What do they like us to be?
Yeah.
Just
So you
the
don't
way
only
we look,
draft the
we
customer
behave.
persona, but then you get into this customer persona's shoes and draft like the ideal coach persona in a way.
Exactly.
Nice.
Exactly.
Okay. Is there anything else that you consider important in this upper part of the equation? So maybe to summarize, we want to increase that compelling dream offer. Like we want to make that we want to make that dream outcome very compelling by picking the right target audience, solving the crucial problem for them and describing it in the right language. And then we want to increase the likelihood of achievement, or the perceived likelihood of achievement from the client's
Yeah.
And that comes with, okay, how much do I as a coach seem to be the person who can help them achieve that? And also to what extent do they trust themselves and the method, the journey that they go on together with you as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are many things that we can do to increase these last two parts. For example, we can really ask ourselves, what is it in reality that makes it more probable that they will achieve the outcome, and then offer just that. As I said, it can be more calls, it can be every day or once a week, or it can be a group call, it can be a WhatsApp group where they meet other people. So you really want to ask ourselves, what is it that inhibits the success, and then offer something that basically brings them over this hurdle.
Yeah. So it's not only about communicating the offer, it's actually about crafting an offer that works.
Absolutely. And that is, I think, maybe the most important thing to understand, and that perhaps also helps with the reputation of marketing and communications, because it's not about, I can sell you everything because I'm doing marketing communications and I have these sales tricks. No, it's really about the strategy behind, and it's about creating value. And only if we really create value, we have a chance to sell it. Otherwise, you need a lot of budget to press something into the market that is not really needed there. And I think no coach has that budget.
Yeah, and also doesn't want that from an ethical standpoint, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Cool. Then let's cross that line that we have here in the middle of our equation and move down to the denominator. And there we have time delay and effort and sacrifice, I guess, on the client's end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so time delay means how much time passes until I get the dream outcome. And as I said, everything that is in the denominator makes the value smaller the higher the amount in the denominator. So the longer the time that we need until we achieve the dream outcome, the lesser the value, the perceived value from the client side, because everybody wants to have things now, right? So if you are a coach helping people to lose weight, they want to lose their 10 pounds, not in 10 months, but in 10 weeks, right? And so, which is important here is to see in what time frames do people think. So for example, in the B2C world, especially, people are expecting to have very small amounts of time. As I said, with weight loss or with building muscles or a six-pack until the summer in 6 weeks, or stuff like that. When we are in the B2B world, plays also an important role. I have many organizational development clients, consulting firms. There, obviously, the timeframes are a little bit more extended. And there we could even say, well, we will change your meeting culture within 4 days. After this 4-day workshop, everything will be different. Yeah. But then what works in the B2B world, for example, very well is maybe we solve a smaller problem. So and there is something, we won't go into detail too much, but there is something like an offer ladder, offers to begin with, and then you have mid-sized offers and then bigger offers. And maybe for the B2B world, sometimes a small offer is very good because it's like a test phase, right? Don't say, oh, I changed your whole organizational culture. You just say, well, your meetings will be more efficient by 20% when we do this 2 times 4 days practice, something like that.
So basically you have different offers, so different sets of equations. And the smaller offers, they can go up in value if you can achieve them very quickly, basically. By making
very well summarized.
Delay, yeah, that making the time delay very small.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, as with the perceived likelihood of achievement, the question for crafting the offer in reality, not in marketing, in reality is what can I do to help them decrease the time they need to do that? So what makes it less time costly, let's say, until they get their result? Yeah. And then we have the effort and sacrifice.
Okay.
And that is what they need to put in order to get the dream outcome. Because it's always something, it's time, it's money, it's energy. So for example, again, for losing 10 pounds, it's not only the pill. I mean, there are pills out there now, but normally it's not only the pill. It is really going to the gym, working out, changing your nutrition, etc. And here again, make a list of all factors that might annoy your client. So really, before trying to solve it, try to understand what are the hurdles. So they don't want to go shopping, for example, and they don't want to go to the gym. They don't want to go 4 times per week to the gym. So what is it? What makes it a little bit more time, energy, money costly for them so that they come to the dream outcome? And then again, creating ideas how you can help them with that. So maybe your special coaching approach helps them because you have special exercises. So they only need to go to the gym 2 times per week, not 4 times. You write them a list of groceries, maybe also individualized for their supermarket around the corner, which is very individualized. You maybe even have like a checklist in the order where how the products are arranged in the supermarket. I mean, I'm now just fantasizing, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it's really, can you help them with the struggles that they have? And that will increase enormously the value.
Yeah, great. So delivering it fast and also helping with all the hurdles that I as a client have to overcome on the road to my dream outcome. Let's actually dive into an example of a concrete coach to summarize the whole value equation.
Okay, let's go for a relationship coach. And the relationship coach is positioned as she helps people in the very concrete situation, should I stay or should I go? So that's the very concrete situation. And the problem that these people have is they are thinking a lot about this question, should I stay or should I go? Sometimes they betray their partners and they don't know, is it worth leaving or should they stay, work on the relationship? They are insecure if it is their problem, their personal problem, or if it's the partner. They're not sure whether what they can expect from a partner. Then the dream outcome for them is being able to trust themselves. That is something that I worked out with my coachee. For other relationship coaches can be very different what the dream outcome is for their client. But in this particular case, we said that the most important thing for them is that they are able, again, to trust themselves, that they have means to communicate their wants and needs respectfully to their partner. So basically, they have more clarity, they have self-confidence, they are less doubtful. That's the dream outcome, in short.
Yeah, I will know what I want.
Yeah, exactly. And the perceived likelihood of achievement, do they trust this coach? Again, this is very much about how they perceive the coach, right? About the chemistry and everything that we just discussed. So that is individual for every prospect. One prospect can say, wow, this is the relationship coach I really want to work with. The one says, well, who is that? No, thanks. So that is really something that is more about a match and chemistry and relatability. So for the method, it is about creating a very relatable process. We created with this coach, we created a process from this point A to the point B, which is very well understandable. So for example, we have different tool sets. We have NLP, we have systemic, we have hypnosis, and we can tell them, well, there is something that is more about this, your actual current situation thing, that is more the NLP part. And we have a systemic approach, which is more about your surrounding and the people around you. And then we have the hypnosis part, which is about the deeper levels of resolving some belief systems. And so we created this method, and the gold standard here is to help people understand why each approach is crucial to the point B. And that helps them enormously to understand, wow, so they really understood how this whole process works. And they use A, B, C, this whole range. That increases enormously the perceived likelihood of achievement in their mind.
Yeah. So they, in a way, see, okay, there's this person who has a toolbox, and those tools in that box, they seem really useful for my problem.
Yeah, it just makes sense. I hear it and it makes sense. And I have this vision. Wow, I think that could work for me.
Yeah. Okay, how about time delay?
I think, first of all, it's important to set a time frame. And that goes for every coach. So it's not, okay, we do one session and then we decide if we do another session and then we decide if we do another session. That creates a sense of, I don't know how long this whole process is taking. And what we want to do here is create a time frame. For example, we say 3 months. And yeah, so here is the problem that maybe the coach will say, I cannot guarantee that after 3 months, we are really where I promised them to be. So this is a delicate adjustment to make, but just telling them, and that is also that is some mindset work as well. When you tell them, well, after 3 months, you will be much, much further down the road, then normally that is exactly what will happen. And if you tell them, oh, this will need 6 months, then it will need 6 months.
Yeah, especially in this example where it's a lot about clarity and in a way decision-making on the client's end. I think a deadline can also simply be a very useful tool to make that decision-making easier. And when it comes to setting this time frame, what I hear is also, it's not only about being fast, but it's also about expectation management in a way.
Exactly. And I think structuring the process is very important for time delay management as well. So you will say, okay, in week 1, we are doing this, or in the first month, week-wise, it's a little difficult in this example, but in the first month, we will lie the basis for everything else. Then in the second month, we will dig deeper and do this, that, and the other. And then in the third month. So also here, this perceived time delay decreases, basically.
Awesome. Lastly, effort and sacrifice.
Yeah, effort and sacrifice. So in this example, effort and sacrifice is I need to have frightening conversations with my partner at some point. And I'm super afraid about that. So one part that I could add to the offer is maybe a cheat sheet, a mindset cheat sheet that I can read with good affirmations before a difficult conversation. That is one idea. Or another thing could be a guide how to have this difficult conversation. Or when you schedule this difficult conversation with your partner, we can make sure that we have a session right afterwards. Put that in the offer on the website. We'll say, well, you know what? You get individual support after difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. And that is something that really brings them over that hurdle.
Yeah, I see. I find it interesting to look at this because having this value equation also comes with having a concrete offer. And I think if I look at the coaching industry, you can do this very non-directive ICF aligned coaching, which I think most people in my bubble associate with coaching. And it's often hard to sort of make a concrete promise there. How does this framework apply here?
So I think the good news is that it applies as well. It's just that the problem that we are describing is less concrete. But still, we need to offer the client something, even on an abstract level, that is appealing to them. So, for example, a recent client of mine had the same thing. And she said, well, no, she doesn't want to be too narrowly positioned. And she really wanted to be open to everybody from children to elderly and really the whole range. And then we were digging a little bit into her own story. And what we found was that it was about resolving blockages and opening doors. And that is something that is very, very open, but still we have a good description of what kind of clients or what kind of problem she wants to work with. Yeah, but it's on an abstract level. Having a blockage can be, I'm always yelling at my partner and I don't want that. I want to stop that. But having a blockage can also be, I always procrastinate and I want to stop that. So we really conceptualize it as there is a behavior and I want to change it and I tried so much, but I'm not getting anywhere. Can you please help me? And it's not, I coach everything. No, it's resolving blockages in behaviors.
Mm-hmm. And what I hear is in your example, it's also in a way the story of the coach that holds a promise in itself already.
Yeah. And the best coaches, in my perception, are the ones who are aligned with who they are, what they bring to the table, really from their story, from their education background, but also personal background. It needs to be a match. And then they bring a certain energy to the table, and this whole thing works best if their energy matches the energy of the client.
So it's all about knowing who I am, and then I can also show people who they can become.
Yes, with the little add-on, in my opinion, it's not as narrow as, okay, I walk the path and I show you now how to walk the path. I think coaches are more than that. They bring more with them. This is why they have their education. They're not only experts because they have walked the path. They are experts also because they have a certain education, because they have personal, professional experience. Otherwise, we are all coaches who are only coaching what we experienced in our lives before.
Yeah, exactly. And the less I know about your problem, the more unbiased I can guide you.
Exactly.
Yeah. On the one hand, does the client trust me as a coach, but also does the client trust themselves? And that also doesn't require me as a coach to have any relevant experience in the path they are walking.
Exactly. And I think there are some meta competencies that help enormously with this. If they have deep trust issues with themselves, with the world, I think it's really hard to help these people. I mean, I think in the coaching world, we are speaking about coachable and non-coachable clients. So I think there must be a certain degree of, okay, I'm open to change and I'm open to letting me being guided by somebody. But then if that openness exists, then me as a coach, I can totally help them trust themselves more that they can get there.
Okay. If I want to now work out this value equation for me as a coach, what would be your recommendation for first steps I can take?
So first of all, I would sit down with a piece of paper and ask myself, what do I bring to the table as a person? What values do I have? What successes did I already have with clients? What education do I have? So I really always start with the profile, because that determines in the end the target group, amongst other things. And that is, it's like the foundation underneath the dream outcome, because otherwise I cannot define a dream outcome. But once I know in which market I'm in, what I especially am able to do with coaches, what my values are, what makes me unique, then I can create this dream outcome. And I always make like a piece of paper and then really draw a line, say, okay, this is A, this is B, and then say, okay, what do they experience before and what do they ideally experience afterwards? And this sets the tone for the dream outcome, I'd say. And then really go around as we did and think these different things through. And again, make it written. Really make lists. Okay, what does my perfect coachee inhibit their success? And then try to come up with answers. How can I help them with that?
Yeah. So start with the dream outcome and do all of this in a written format, work through that equation.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. And if I now worked out my value equation, how do I know what value, like actual monetary value, can I ascribe to my offer?
Yeah, so that is always the key question, obviously. I would say, I mean, this is a whole topic in itself, but the important thing to consider is what would the person be willing to pay while they are at point A if I told them this problem will disappear, or you will be at point B in X weeks, months, etc. And this is really important because many coaches think, so a coaching hour is 100 euros or is 120 euros, and this is what the market can bear, and full stop. And sure, there are market things to be considered. We cannot free float without considering market topics, but still really we are doing this whole value equation thing exactly for that, knowing what is really the pain point of our client. And so again, the question is, what would somebody be willing to pay if I told them this problem will go away? Most of the time, the value is much higher than if I just said, well, this is 10 coaching sessions and one session is 100 euros. And perhaps one more thing, it's this whole process that we are doing. In the end, we oftentimes have many little things that we add to our offer. So we have sessions, we have checklists, we have maybe a spoken meditation, we have a WhatsApp group. So we have many different parts of the offer. And that is something that Alex Hormozi is calling the category of one. So now it's not comparable to other offers. It's not, okay, 1 hour here costs 100 and here 1 hour costs 300 euros. Why the hell? It's not comparable. It's my individual transformation journey that I'm offering my clients, and it costs X. And now please decide, is it as valuable for you or not? And this is how I would go about this.
Yeah, that's really cool. Category of one. Okay, thanks. That's it for today. So much for the value equation with Julika Franke. If you haven't yet, I'd encourage you to follow Julika's Getting Started advice. Get out pen and paper or a digital whiteboard, sketch the journey for your client from A to B, and then actually create your equation. Write down the equation as visible on our video. So dream outcome times likelihood of achievement divided by time delay and effort. And then actually formulate this for your own specific case. And if you're unsure how your offer actually looks like, doing this becomes even more valuable. You simply do this exercise not once, but for the 2 or 3 different offers that you consider. And then you compare where the value for your client actually comes out highest. If you do so, I'd be super curious how your experience is. Please share in the comments or drop me an email to tobias@metafox.eu. Or of course, do this whole exercise together with Julika. You can find her on julika-franke.de or on LinkedIn, both in the show notes. We'll be back here in 2 weeks, then making all of this offer and positioning work very personal with Julika coaching me on my business role at Metafox and overcoming some mental blockers when it comes to our new coach training program. All of this for the start of the new year in 2 weeks. I'm Tobi from Metafox, and I say thank you for being with me, with us throughout this year. Happy holidays and all the best on your own journey as a coach. Cheers.
I'll make it as a coach, light the spark inside, empower every soul to turn the tide. I'll make it as a coach, help others grow, changing lives with every story I know.